Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In case this is your first time checking out my channel, my name is Rachel Clemens and I cover true crime stories. I also do some story time. If that's something that you're into, be sure to subscribe. Make sure to hit that notification bell so that every time that I post, you're not going to miss. Now, I really want to jump straight into today's case. This one has been extensive as far as information and digging up research on this case, which is why this is coming out a couple days later than what I would have naturally liked it to have been. Life happens, and there is a lot of information to this case. Today, we're going to be talking about a case out of Mississippi, and that is the case of Christian Andreacchio. Christian Andreacchio is from Meridian, Mississippi. Christian was 21 during the time frame that we're going to be talking about here. The things that I've heard and the things that people say about Christian and his family say and his friends, and Christian was a super outgoing guy, very happy, very loving, very goal-oriented. The stories I've heard of his life are just insane, of this guy's work ethic. He was going to work with his dad by the time he was 9 years old. A little bit more about Christian. Christian in school had started dating a girl named Avery. Him and Avery had just like the most wholesome relationship possible, from what it sounds like. And they were super great together. And when Christian turned 18, he actually got a job on a chemical barge, a tugboat. They would say this guy was just the best worker out there. He was really on the fast track to becoming the youngest captain of a tugboat. That was his main goal, and he was definitely on his way. Working this type of job, Christian would leave for like 30 days at a time, come back for another 15 days, and then go back out for another 30. So it was a time-consuming job, but he loved it, and he was so good at it. Not to mention, he was making very good money doing what he was doing. But him and Avery did end up kind of splitting their ways, not on any bad terms whatsoever, but it was more so just she had her own, goals and stuff that she had set. She was going to vet school. Christian was so supportive over that and really encouraged her to just, don't let me stand in the way. If you have a dream, you need to go out and make it happen. And that's exactly what happened. In 2013, at this point, Christian was 19 to 20 years old, and they ended up cutting things off in 2013, and she went to vet school, and he just continued working on the tugboat and just killing it. I mean, this kid at this age, he was living the life. He bought a BMW. He had jet skis. He was always out on the lake. His family really, they were just like a water sport, recreational. They're just a water family. Christian was making really good money. He was living at home with his parents at the time. Christian ended up starting to date a new girl. Her name was Whitley. Whitley was 17 years old, and she had a background of not very great things. Whitley could be described as having somewhat of a rough childhood. Her parents ended up kicking her out at a fairly early age. She was really known for, kind of drug use, partying, stealing, lying, just anything you can kind of name. The people that I found in my research, the way that they really described her was not in the best light, which would really make you wonder, why, Christian? Why would you date this girl?
Hey guys, I'm in the middle of editing, and I just realized that I forgot to mention that when Christian started dating Whitley, that was the same point in time that he met a gentleman named Dylan. And those three kind of became like a trio. It was just the three of them.
But so since Christian and Whitley were dating and Whitley really didn't have anywhere to stay, his family decided to let her come and stay with them because that's just the type of family that they were. Christian felt really bad and just wanted to be there to support her, give her a place, and just help her along her way. Now, that support and all that would quickly kind of diminish over the next month of her moving in. She was doing some really sketchy things. There was a report that Whitley called Christian while he was on the boat to tell him that, hey, I caught your sister smoking, his underage sister smoking, and I just wanted to let you know. And so Christian calls home and talks to his mom and says, Mom, Whitley just found her smoking. And she says that's impossible. She's upstairs. She's definitely not out smoking. So, just making up stories to get his sister in trouble. Whitley was the type that really just didn't seem to care about consequences. She would just do things and not really care about what the effects that were going to happen afterwards. To the point that while she was living with his family, she was getting onto social media and posting what I would deem as very strange things. While she was living there, she posted a statement saying, "Meth or bath salts today?" ? She obviously didn't work and was posting these random drug-related posts that would make you think, what the hell is going on here? Now, they would say that Whitley was actually jealous of the relationship that Christian had with his sister because they were super, super close. Christian would be described almost as his sister's second dad because he was very fatherly towards her, and she would always call him if she needed advice or needed some kind of extra direction. So they had such a close relationship, and Whitley absolutely hated it. Another super strange thing that Whitley had done, there was actually a picture of Christian's ex-girlfriend Avery in Christian's mom's room. Whitley actually took this picture of his ex-girlfriend Avery because they were so close. They grew up together. They were together the whole time. They were all just family. Avery's family really looked at Christian as family. They were super close, and even though they split, it was never going to change. So, of course, she kept a picture. Whitley ended up taking this picture to the shooting range and shot a hole through Avery's face, brought the picture frame back, and laid it on the counter for Christian's mom and said, "This is what I think of this." Also, another thing to note during this time period, Whitley had found out that Christian still had his ex-girlfriend Avery on his life insurance policy. Whitley was really pushing for Christian to change his life insurance over to her. I believe it was around October, November of 2013. Christian's parents heard about this and they were like, absolutely no way. First of all, that threw red flags. Now, Whitley's response to this was, well, what will happen to me and the baby if you die? During this time period, she was not pregnant. I find it really strange that she would bring in a baby almost to amplify the empathy for this situation and why he should be doing that. That's just me. So, of course, Whitley is kicked out of the house by all these numerous red flags. Mind you, it's only been a month. Christian ends up moving out and getting an apartment with his brother Josh. And, of course, Whitley moves in as well. During my research, people that were actually close to Whitley, still, people that were considered her close friends, didn't have very nice things to say about her. They would describe her as sneaky, manipulative, and also a cheater. With that being said, of course, Christian would leave for 30 days at a time to go work. When Christian would leave, Whitley would take his car and just drive it around. She was doing drugs. She was partying. They would say almost as soon as he would leave, she would start messaging other guys, trying to get more attention. Now, Christian, of course, isn't stupid, and he found this stuff out. And he was threatening to kick her out. He wasn't trying to give up completely at this point, but he did threaten to kick her out and actually give her a drug test, which I don't know for sure if that ever happened. I highly doubt it, because had he found out earlier, I highly doubt I would be making this video. Now, on February 22nd, 2014, Christian drove his Jeep to Vicksburg to drop it off so that he can head to work for his 30-day work schedule. Of course, the night before, him and Whitley had gotten into a fight. Because she was wanting to go to her family's and have a Mardi Gras party. And he was asking her just to stay home. I mean, at this point, he really didn't have a whole lot of trust in her, which I can't say that I blame him. And 3 days after heading out for work, on the 25th of February, Christian receives multiple frantic phone calls that day from Dylan stating that he needs to come home because he saw Whitley driving around in his BMW, even though he asked her not to. And not only that, but she was riding around with a guy that is considered a drug dealer within the area. Hearing this, obviously Christian is like, fuck that. To get off of the tugboat, I mean, obviously is not easy thing to do. They're out on the water for a reason and can't return for a reason. So it's only like big emergencies that they allow their crew to go back to the dock and head home for any certain amount of time. So Christian gave the excuse to get back home of that, like his parents were fighting and he had to go back home and kind of settle it, essentially for a family emergency. And it worked. So Dylan came to pick up Christian the next morning at around 8 o'clock in the morning from New Orleans. They ended up driving back to Meridian, and they got back to Meridian around 11:30. And keep in mind, Christian had to be back in New Orleans to get back on the tugboat by 5 p.m. that night. So he didn't really have a lot of time. His plan going into this was to get home, kick Whitley out, take the keys, and just be done with the entire situation to where he can not be distracted while he's back at work and go back to work. Now, fast forward to 4:30 p.m., February 26th, 2014. Dylan calls 911. Dylan states that Christian committed suicide in the bathroom of his apartment. Now, when he originally called, he called stating that they were at apartment 801 in the Woodlawn Apartments. And the 911 operator actually had to give him a call back, confirm that or deny that, because the police were unable to locate them. They stated he actually gave them the wrong location. It was actually in Willow Ridge. Same apartment number, just wrong location completely. While on the phone with the 911 operator, the operator did ask Dylan if Christian had ever threatened to hurt himself or anything like that, and Dylan said absolutely not, no. So 4:45 rolls around and the police show up, and this is where it gets frustrating, because 40 minutes into the police being there on the scene, the chief of police in Meridian called it quits on the investigation. He said, yep, that's it. This is a suicide. Let's wrap it up, guys. Get your stuff. Let's get out of here. 40 minutes. Christian was found face down in the bathtub with both of his arms outside of the tub. The scene is very strange in how he's laid out, honestly. If I can help give you an idea of how stretched out he was, his knees were about 12 inches away from the base of the tub. His feet were laid out, but his ankles were crossed. His feet were about an inch into the doorway of the bathroom. This is a super small bathroom. I mean, it's about the size of my bathroom. It's one toilet, shower, and done. You can fit one person comfortably in there, and that's about it. So his body's kind of drawn out and his head is into the tub. Something I found strange in this, and a lot of people have, is there was no bullet hole in the shower at all. This is a fiberglass shower. There's no way that a bullet hole would have ricocheted out of the bathroom and gone anywhere else. I hate to do this, but just to give a visual of what it was, Christian was right-handed. He had a gunshot to the back right side of his head, the exit out this way. I mean, he would have had to have been like this. If you think about that with the recoil, that's insane. You would have thought that it would have pushed him this way and the gun would have went. But here's the thing, in between his legs and the tub laid the gun laying this way. Like if you were holding the gun like if the gun was like this, it was facing like this when he would have shot like this with the recoil, but the gun was found like this. Not only that, here's the kicker. The gun was a .45 cal semi-automatic gun. And if you know anything about guns, especially semi-automatics, is that you don't have to manually cock the gun every time that you shoot it. It's ready to go the next time. But when they found the gun was decocked, which means that the hammer was manually decocked. Do you think he did that after he shot himself? Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So like I said, the chief of police wrapped this up in 40 minutes, called it a day, didn't investigate, didn't pull evidence, and didn't really question the scene that they were looking at. And they didn't take much from the scene as far as evidence. Christian's brother was actually left to do the cleanup of everything. Mind you, Christian's brother Josh also worked on the barge, and he had been gone for quite some time, almost a full month, and before he left, their apartment was immaculate. When he returned to the scene after he found out that his brother had passed, he found his apartment, their apartment, was completely trashed. There was cigarette burns in the carpet, beer cans everywhere, and somebody had actually even taken a knife to Christian's bed and cut all the stuffing out of it, almost like somebody was looking for something. Not only that, but his brother had to clean up the bathroom on his own. But a couple good things came out of this. While he was cleaning the bathroom, his brother Josh actually found a bloody t-shirt that had been stuffed up behind the toilet. I don't know about you, but I highly doubt that's a coincidence. They had also found a knife that had blood on it as well. So Christian's family took this evidence that they had found that the investigators and police had just left behind and took it back to the police and said, hey, we found this. We think you should take a look at it, maybe test it. And, here you go. Here's some stuff. It's, there's more to this story than what we know. A strange thing as well was Christian's body, when it was found, Christian had lividity on the back of one of his calves. Now, if you don't know what lividity is, it's where when you pass away, obviously your heart stops, so your blood is no longer moving freely in your body. It just stops pumping. So once that happens, it begins to settle. And as far as gravity goes, if you die on your back, your back is going to have lividity on it, the backs of your legs. Christian had lividity on the back of his calves. And if you remember how I told you he was found face down with his head in the tub, arms outside, legs stretched out. The front side of his body was facing down. So the fact that he had lividity on the back of his calf is extremely questionable. It was also discovered later that by the time that the coroner had gotten to the scene to get Christian, he was in full rigor mortis at this point, and allegedly, he had taken his life within the last hour, which doesn't match up. So Dylan, of course, had to give a statement, as he was the one that reported finding Christian. The following is the statement that he gave the police. Dylan stated that Christian called him on the 25th and asked him if he could pick him up on the 26th to come home. And so he said that he picked him up at about 8 o'clock in New Orleans. And on their way back to Meridian, they were, of course, talking. And Dylan said that this is when he found out that Christian and Whitley were having problems in their relationship, and that this was the reason why he was coming home. Yet all accounts state that Dylan was calling him the day before about Whitley being wild and crazy and not listening. I digress. Let's continue. Dylan stated that once they got back to Meridian around 11:30, that immediately Whitley and Christian got into an argument. Dylan goes upstairs to use the bathroom, I believe. He hears Christian screaming, "Do you love me? Do you love me?" And he comes to the stairwell to look down and see what's going on. And he states that he sees Christian with his gun, pointing it to his head, screaming, "Do you love me?" He said things calmed down after that. They all watched a movie together. Now, Dylan states that after the movie was over, that he got up and, offered to give them some time to themselves and offered to go and get food for everybody. Christian immediately was like, "Yes, I want some Chick-fil-A. Here's my card. Go get us some Chick-fil-A. Oh, while you're out, can you also go to the bank and pull out all my money for me? Thanks." Dylan also states that he offered to take Whitley's phone in to go get it fixed because it had been broken apparently at some point, and offered to go and get it fixed for her, which, long story short, it didn't get fixed. Now, Dylan says that before he leaves, he hid the gun from Christian behind a curtain before he leaves, just to be sure that nothing happens while he's gone. Now, what's wrong with this time frame that Dylan is trying to spew out during his interview is the fact that he said that they got back home to Meridian at about 11:30, argued, let's just say that's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I don't know. So noon rolls around, they start a movie Movie's about an hour and a half, 2 hours. That would make it about 1:30, 2 o'clock. And yet, Dylan was caught on camera at the bank an hour after they would have arrived back to Meridian. So the time frame already is not right. Of course, he goes to the bank and he states that it didn't work for some reason. It wasn't working. So Dylan headed to Chick-fil-A and went back to the house, arrived back at the house with the food from Chick-fil-A, said everything was good, and they decided to all watch another movie while they ate their Chick-fil-A, which, let's keep in mind, in his time frame of how things happened, at this point it's about 2:30. And he states that they watched a movie. It's another hour and a half, 2 hours. That would put us at about 4:30 at this point. 4:30. After the second movie, Dylan says that Whitley and Christian went for a drive to go and talk. So Dylan said he went to go take a nap and that he slept for about 2 hours. I don't know how this is being added into the time frame, but he says that by the time that he woke up from his nap, he came downstairs and Whitley was sleeping and Christian was smoking on the couch. Now, Dylan says that he wanted to head to Best Buy to go check out some speakers at this point. And before he left, he said that he gave the gun back to Christian. He reminded Christian to unload it and to not mess with it again. Of course, like any sane person, the police asked, well, why would you give it back to him? His response was, I couldn't take it with me. But before he went to Chick-fil-A, he was able to hide the gun. So Dylan leaves. So once he gets back to the house, he is kind of calling through the house for Christian, Whitley. Nobody's answering. He saw a light on in the bathroom. They had a set of stairs that led straight up to the bathroom, and the bathroom door was at the top of those stairs. And he saw the light on. And he claims he assumed that Christian was taking a shower. He claims that he walked up to the door and knocked on the door and said, "Are you all right?" Which, to me, I find it strange. A number of things wrong with this. First of all, if Christian was taking a shower, I'm pretty sure you would have heard water. You would have heard something if you thought that he was taking a shower. Secondly, why would your first response be, "Are you all right?" Wouldn't it be, "Hey, I'm back from Best Buy"? Not to mention, Christian had to be back in New Orleans by 5. And Dylan knew this. And I'm sure Whitley knew this at some point. And it was obviously roughly a 3.5-hour drive back to New Orleans. Again, the time frame is just not correct or working. So Dylan's at the door and says, "Are you all right?" And he did not get a response. So Dylan claims that he went back downstairs and woke Whitley up from her nap and told her, "Hey, I'm trying to talk to Christian and he's not responding in the bathroom." And so they both go to the bathroom door again and they called out his name again to no response. So they opened the door and that is when they found Christian. Now, Whitley's statement about what happened that day definitely didn't match up with Dylan's. However, it was a very short statement. I mean, she didn't really give a lot of details. She was very vague. Let me tell you what I mean by this. Whitley stated that the night before, on the 25th, that she got a phone call from Christian stating that he was done working on the tugboat and he was going to quit and he was coming home, which in itself is, I think, really a ridiculous statement to even make. Obviously, he was very goal-driven and very hardworking, and he loved his job. He had goals in his job. Why would he quit? She claims that he got home and he wanted to go for a drive out to Bonita. Now, Bonita looks to me to be like a park, like a recreational park that was about 4 minutes from his apartment. She states that they went to this park and stopped and had a long talk, and he made the comment that between his mom and her, he couldn't make anybody happy. And then her story jumps to they're back home, that she just went to go take a nap with her dog, and that she woke up and Christian was dead. There's obvious major gaps in her story, things that contradict themselves. There was no statement made about the gun to his head or them having an argument or Chick-fil-A or watching movies. I mean, nothing was matching up. The police station asked her, if Christian had ever talked about hurting himself prior to this. And her response was, "No, I don't think so." She claims that she never heard the gunshot and that Dylan was the one that woke her up and they went and together found Christian. Christian. Now, of course, all three of them, Dylan, Whitley, and Christian, were given a GSR test, which is the gunshot residue, and all three did test positive. Prior to the test, I believe that Whitley said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm going to come up positive because last night on the 25th, I went shooting with some friends." She claims that her, Matt Miller, and his cousin Jet had gone to a shooting range and had shot some guns the night before, and she would have that residue on her hands that would make her test positive. Now, from what I've researched, is that the gunshot residue would last about 4 to 6 hours, roughly, on anybody's hands. You can also get this residue on your hands from just handling a gun that had been shot recently as well. Now, a couple weeks after Christian's death, Matt Miller actually finally came forward with a statement of his own. Now, Matt claims that he knew Whitley for quite a while. He didn't really know her super, super well. What he did know about her was that she was kind of crazy and a little wild. Now, Matt claims that 2 to 3 days before Christian's death, which would be around the 22nd when he left to go to work, she had contacted him on Snapchat. And he responded by asking her if her and Christian were still together. Her response was no. Now, Jet, Matt's cousin, wanted to go shooting on the 25th, and they did in fact go shooting, but Matt claims that Whitley never shot a gun at the range, that she was actually terrified of the gun, too scared to shoot it, and he claims that she sat on his lap while he covered her ears because she was so scared. He claims that later that night they ended up having sex. Mind you, it's on the 25th. And he said that he dropped her off the morning of the 26th around like 6:30. The morning of the 26th, Matt worked from about 7:45 until 3 p.m. that day. Once he got home after 3, he took a nap, woke up. Around 8 p.m., he received a phone call from his cousin Jet asking him if he had heard about Christian's death yet. Immediately after that, Matt calls Whitley to find out what happened. Here's the funny thing. Whitley's story changes when Matt calls her to find out what had happened. Whitley states that Christian found out about her and Matt having a relationship. She claims that he had trackers on their phones and he knew and found out about them and came home, and that they had drove around talking, and that they ended up actually going back home and taking a nap together, and that she was woke up by a gunshot. You remember the one that she didn't hear before? That's what woke her up. And she went upstairs and she is the one that found him. She also claimed at the time that he was shot in the throat. The story that she told Matt was that he was shot in the throat. Obviously doesn't match the statement that she literally gave hours before this phone conversation. After this, Matt claims that he avoided her. It turns out that actually the day of the 26th, Whitley had been texting Matt from Christian's phone because Whitley's phone was broken. And she had been texting Matt from Christian's phone during the day on the 26th. I don't know about you, but somebody that you're trying to reconcile or have any kind of relationship with, I highly doubt is going to hand over their phone and be like, here, you can call the person that you're cheating on me with. That's just not going to happen. A week after Christian's death, Matt finally actually confronted Whitley because he had heard the stories of the statement that she had given to the police and knew obviously something was not lining up here. And he confronted her and said, hey, so did you hear the gunshot or did you not? She says, no, I didn't. And, who found Christian? Was it you or was it Dylan? She said, oh, it was Dylan. She reverted back to her statement that she had given to the police. And she completely just denied even telling Matt that Christian had been shot in the throat. And she also did state that Christian did in fact talk about suicide prior to this. And she told him that if he ever did end up killing himself, to just not shoot himself in the face. Now, Whitley had called and texted Matt from Christian's phone the day on the 26th, asking and pleading with him to come and pick her up because her and Christian were fighting. That poses questions of, when did the phone call start? What was the time frame that we're looking at on when the calls were made? Were there pings off of towers in that location that would give an idea of where that phone was at the time? Now, when Whitley was being questioned at the Meridian Police Department, she in fact actually had Christian's phone on her at the time. and she was refusing to give it over to police. And they ended up actually telling her, okay, you're going to sit here until you hand that over. You are not leaving. And so, of course, she eventually ended up handing the phone over. Now, when police looked at the phone, it did not have any of the text messages that were sent to Matt. They were, of course, all deleted, but Matt did have records showing that he did receive texts and phone calls from this number. Now, there was speculation that Matt brought up to the police to let them know that he had already heard that Dylan and Whitley had been staying actually at Christian's house together, and it was rumored that they were actually sleeping together. Now, of course, like I said, the GSR tests that were given to Dylan, Whitley, and Christian all came back positive. Now, the results stated that Whitley had gunshot residue on her left palm and the back of her left hand, and also the right palm. Dylan had gunshot residue on both of his palms and both backs of his hands as well. Christian actually had gunshot residue on the back side of his left hand and his right palm. Now, again, there's a ton of reasons that this could have happened. They later on, which I found kind of strange, they actually did a second GSR test on Christian, came up with different results. I don't know why they would have issued another test. But this one showed that he had gunshot residue on both palms and the backs of his hands. Very different results, and I find that strange. So at this point in time, the excuses given by Whitley and Dylan as to why they had gunshot residue on their hands is as follows. Whitley has a BS excuse. Dylan literally had no excuse aside from handling the gun itself. Now, Christian's family has been continuously fighting for somebody to reopen this case and get the ball rolling again, take a look at the evidence, and find what is going on. Do you remember the t-shirt and the knife that was turned in for evidence? Yeah, the police department actually lost that evidence. Now, the parents had been fighting for some time, trying to get the case file so that they were able to really take a better look, because nobody else is really looking at this and investigating anything. Just give it to us, we'll take care of it. It was like pulling teeth trying to get this case from the Attorney General's office. Now, in July of 2019, yes, this is still going on, the Attorney General was welcoming and inviting members of the community to come down to his office, and he would show them the case, put autopsy photos out there, really just berate the family and try and push so hard to emphasize that this was a suicide. This was absolutely not a homicide. We're not going to look into it. It's not our fault. This is the evidence. Everybody look. This was in July of 2019. The Attorney General was really making this information available to specific people, but yet not the family. It took forever for them to get it. And they finally did receive it. But during that time, they're still fighting to get this reopened. Thankfully, in November of 2019, the Meridian Police Department did announce that they were going to reopen this case. Since this case, the police chief, remember the one that shut this down 40 minutes into being on the scene? He has since been fired. I have actually been following this case, not incredibly long, but since about a year ago, roughly, because there's just so many questions behind this. And there is so much more stuff to this story. There's so much more detail to this story that I can't find the time to get it in. But I will link down below. There's an amazing podcast on this. And I'm sure if you've heard this story, you know of this podcast. And it is just amazing. I will link it down below. There are 14 episodes. I encourage you, if you agree that there's any kind of injustice in this case, take a look at this. Listen through these podcasts. They are amazing, and they have way more information than what I was able to squeeze into my video for today. I will link that down below. I want to extend my heartfelt condolences to the Andreacchio family. I stand with you, because there's obviously way more to this story than what is being determined on the end. And I hope and pray with them coming through and reopening this case that they really do find the correct justice in this story and in this case, because Christian was such a beacon of light. He was an inspiring person. What happened to him was just so awful. And so my heart goes out to that family. Be sure to check out the podcast Culpable. I will link it down below. And since this will be reopened, the case is being reopened, I will update later with hopefully a justice. But now, so I want to ask you guys, from the information that was given, what do you think? Please leave me your thoughts down below. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. I will be putting out videos every single week. I want to really focus on injustices done or unsolved cases, just because there's a huge purpose behind that. Cases that don't get enough recognition or airtime, if you will. And when you do that, that's when action starts happening. Because look at this, 2019, they're reopening the case. Fantastic. So things like this is what makes it important. I just want to thank you guys for joining me and supporting me, and we'll see you next week. Bye.